The next area we'll take a look at is the equipment in Facil. And of course, since one of Facil's most important functions is to reserve equipment, we need to have an inventory of the equipment that we're going to be reserving and tracking. From the main menu, we have the equipment form. It's a full screen form. There are 3 tabs: equipment types, equipment units, and equipment maintenance. Some concepts to help you understand what's going on here. The equipment types is the broadest category. What we're trying for here is a list of the different kinds of equipment that you have. And more specifically, each item that you want to be able to reserve, each kind of item that you want to be able to reserve is listed here as an equipment type. Examples, some simple ones. We have here different AC extension cords, power boxes, camera batteries, cameras themselves. You'll notice though that when we look at the camcorders, we have 3 listings for 3 different models because we want people to be able to choose which kind of camcorder they're going to reserve. We want to keep those separate. So we're going to have an equipment type for each different kind of camcorder that we would reserve. Of course, for the batteries, we would have the matching batteries would each be a different equipment type because we can't obviously give the wrong kind of battery. So for each specific kind of equipment you're going to reserve, you would have an equipment type. Now another way of looking at equipment types is in your facilities. Here, for example, we have edit suites or studios. A studio, of course, is not a piece of equipment. It's a lot of different complicated pieces of equipment, but it's reserved as a single item. You don't reserve one side of the studio or one piece of equipment from the studio. It's what we call in Facil a package of different equipment, all of which is reserved as a single item. So again, the simplest way of looking at this is that the equipment types are the list of different things you can reserve, the different kinds of equipment you can reserve, ranging from extension cords up to a studio or an edit suite. Let's look at the information that's included in each equipment type record. There's the name of the equipment type, and this is important because it's going to present you an alphabetical list of the things that can be reserved. So we start off with AC power, for example, to keep those together. There are 3 different types of inventorying of items. A supply item is an item that we have a number of, but we don't keep individual records on them. Extension cords, it's important to know that we have, in this case, 25 of this length of extension cord, but we don't need to deal with things like serial numbers or dates of purchase or other inventory information. We call that a supply item. There's a longer description that tells us more detail about what that piece of equipment is. On the right, we have the choices of putting a certification that is required to use any given piece of equipment. For example, down here on the camcorder, we've chosen Field Advanced, and this is one of our class certification codes that we've established. And by setting Field Advanced as the certification required for this piece of equipment, now whenever that piece of equipment is reserved, Facil will automatically check that the person reserving it has the certification that's required and let you know. Next to the certification are 2 fields that let us set the value or the rate to account for facility and resource consumption in Facil. For example, we're saying that this particular kind of camcorder we value at $40 a day, and it can be done by the hour, by the day, or by the use. This is for our budgeting and resource allocation. A couple other options. You can set an item to be reservable or not. Can reserve, yes or no. The reason for doing that is that you're going to want to keep your entire inventory in Facil rather than duplicating inventories. So by allowing you to have items that are not reservable, such as perhaps your office equipment, furniture, and so on, you can keep a complete inventory but not deal with those items when you're making equipment and facility reservations. A couple of other options. You can choose whether or not to include the equipment type in the public reservation display. We'll be showing you that later. It's a tool that lets everyone who comes in check to see for themselves, not just your staff members, but everyone, your members, volunteers, producers, whoever they are, check for themselves to see what the schedule is, when items are available, when they could possibly use the studio or the edit suite. We'll look at that in more detail. This setting allows you to determine whether or not this particular piece of equipment is included in that. And finally, we have a field for replacement cost. For example, if we go up to this camcorder again, we'll enter a replacement cost of $4,500. It's a pro-level camcorder. The purpose of entering this is to allow us to show on the reservation receipt the value of the equipment that the member has taken, so they understand what their responsibility is in terms of protecting and returning that equipment. So all of this together has defined the equipment type. That's one kind of thing we can reserve. There are two more levels to the equipment. Starting with the types, the next level of detail is equipment units, and that's the second tab. We'll use that same camcorder as an example. We select that and click equipment units, and now we see a list of all the individual camcorders. This is your actual physical inventory. We have tag numbers, manufacturer, model, description, serial number, who owns it. Again, this is user-definable choices of the describing your situation, where it's located, and most importantly, the status. Here we have a status of available, meaning that it could be used. It's ready to be checked out or put into use. We also keep track for purchasing and inventory of whether or not it's capital equipment, the date it was purchased, who it was purchased from. There is a vendor list in Facil. Right here we can select the vendors for that piece of equipment, and again there's a link button that would take us to the vendor record so that we would have phone number, email, personnel information, and so on to get in touch with that vendor. So that's the actual inventory that tells us all about that particular camera. Because we selected one equipment type before we went to equipment units, everything on this list is that type of camera. It tells us that right here at the heading, repeating the name of the camera and the quantity available. We can also filter this list to show all the units, just the available units, or just the units that are not available. So if you have a large number, say, of batteries or something, you could select not available and see which ones are broken or what needs maintenance. The camera that we're looking at here is of the inventory type of unit, which means simply that there are a number of them and they're all the same. They're all interchangeable. In this case, we have 4 of this same kind of camera, and they're interchangeable. If we go back to equipment types and go down to an edit suite or a studio, as an example, this is what we would call a package in Facil. When we go to the units, again, there's a list of many units, but they're not all the same. In an edit suite, we would have a controller, edit decks, and so on. So a package is a block of equipment, a set of equipment that is reserved as a single item, but they're different pieces of equipment. Again, an edit suite or a studio is the example. A unit is a number of pieces of equipment that are interchangeable, that are all the same. But either way, you can select the item you want to reserve, and you have a complete inventory of every item with all your purchase information and so on attached to that. If we go one step further, for every individual item, there is a set of maintenance records. So when we're looking at the equipment units, we can click on the maintenance tab, and we see repeated here what kind of equipment it is, where it is, and a record with date, the technician's name, the description of the maintenance, parts, and labor costs. So we have a complete maintenance record for every event that takes place for every piece of equipment. That's the basic definition of equipment types. I'll just mention a couple of other things. You'll notice that it always shows the quantity available for each type of equipment, and that's what the reservation system uses. If there are 25 of something available, it's going to keep track as each one is reserved. When the reservation starts, reservation ends, and it always knows, Facil always knows exactly how many are remaining to be reserved at any given time based on the quantity available. Now, the quantity available is dependent on the status of the pieces. If we're talking about camcorders, and again, we'll go back to our example of this camcorder. It says there are 4 available. If I go to the units, I see that there are 4 of them, and yes, they're all marked available. As soon as I change one of those to not available, any status other than available, we'll put repair, the quantity changes to 3. We can see that in the corner. If we go back to the equipment type list, we see that the quantity available is now 3 because we took 1 out of available status. If, when we made that change, it created an overbooking situation, Facil would notify you. Because there was no overbooking, we didn't see anything happening, but when we make that change and save it, Facil goes and checks all the current reservations to see if the reduction in the quantity available causes a problem at any time in the future in the nature of an overbooking, and it will then automatically let you print a report that shows you exactly whose reservations are involved so that you can deal with that situation. Of course, when we change the status back to available, then the quantity available would go back up to its original 4. A package, like the Studio or Edit Suite, works a little differently because, by definition, the quantity of a package is 1. If you do have 2 studios, Studio A, Studio B, you're going to treat those as separate equipment types because they're almost certainly not exactly the same, and you want to keep track of them independently. So the quantity of a package is always 1. Whether or not the package is available is up to you, because it may be, for example, in a Studio or an Edit Suite, that there's one piece of equipment perhaps that is not available right then, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to be able to use the Edit Suite. Let's take this Edit Suite again as an example. Go to the units. Here's our list, controller, edit deck, and so on. But I can take one item out of service. Let's say this single edit deck. Change the status to repair. And what Facil does is to ask the question, does this make the package unavailable? It's up to you to decide whether you want to continue to reserve that edit suite with this single piece of equipment down. We'll say no, do not make the package unavailable. The package stays available, and the quantity available, of course, stays as 1. If, for any reason, we do decide to make the package unavailable, then, of course, we're going to have the overbooking situation. If there are any reservations for that package, we're going to get a report of all of those. Furthermore, to make sure that this works properly for you when you're making your reservations, when you reserve a package and one of the pieces of equipment is not available, you'll be notified of that. So if you went ahead and reserved this edit suite with one edit deck not available, it's going to notify you exactly which piece of equipment is not available when you make the reservation, so you can determine if that's going to be a problem in that particular situation. Okay, we've looked at persons and equipment, and to put those together, we're going to now look at the reservations. This is the most powerful part of Facil, one of the most powerful and one of the more complicated. We'll look at a lot of the special features that are involved with reservations. It starts with a single form, and here's our reservation form. Basically, there's information on the left that tells us the project, the person, and the start-end time of the reservation, also its status and notes. To the right, we have a list of all the reserved equipment. Now, you may find that your normal reservation is just for one piece of equipment. On the other hand, some reservations may have dozens of pieces of equipment. You can have as many as necessary in the reservation. When you make a reservation, you start by identifying the project and person, the start date, end date, and then you will be adding your equipment items to it, and there's several ways to do that. On the right, we have a lot of special buttons that do some other functions associated with reservations, again, to make the system as easy as possible to use. You can duplicate reservations. There's special functions for equipment that is checked in and out in a lending situation. Many other special features, and we'll try and demonstrate those to you. Again, starting on the left, we have the project ID, and that's the only part that we need to fill in, is just to select the project. All of the other information about the project, which you're seeing here, its status, when it's supposed to start and end, the normal length and production type of the programs, who the producer is, all this information is shown to you from the project record, so that it's always accurate and up to date as soon as you select the project. Same thing with the person, selecting the person and seeing their name, address, phone numbers, and so on. We'll do a new reservation. I'll just click the new button at the bottom. And the form, of course, starts blank. You can see we have 33 reservations. Let's go to the top where we have the project ID. And this is where we typically start. Now, we start with the project rather than the person because typically there is one person associated with each project. So that lets us use a default. If I pick softball action as my project, first thing that happens is I get notices relating to the person and the project. It tells me that the project is associated with the Tucson Junior Softball League organization, but the person is not. All this type of relation is tracked by Facil. Now, what person is it talking about? All I did was pick a project, but because a producer has been defined for the project, it automatically filled in that producer for me. Let's pick a different project. Let's pick New Desert Rock. Here's another notice, and this is an example of the kind of notices you would get about the project data. Here it's warning me that the project is past its planned end date. Again, a way of keeping track of what's going on with the different projects. Second notice, again, the person is not affiliated with the organization. If I pick a different person, notices about that person. So again, there's a default, the producer for the project, but you can select any other person if they're making the reservation. So there's our project in person. Start date and time, we'll pick from the calendar. We'll say 6 p.m. on that Thursday. A notice about the time that the facility is open. Sorry, let me bring that back for you. The reservation has a default length of 3 hours. That's something you can set for whatever default you want. And because that took us to 9 p.m., we're getting a notice warning us that the facility closes at 8. Again, of course, those hours are defined by you. So all we had to do to create a reservation, we did see all those notices, but all we had to do is pick a project, start, and end times. Even the end time can be a default. So it's a minimal amount of information. The status, of course, defaults to active. So we're ready with our reservation now. We'll save it. And now we're ready to start adding items. And right up here at the top, we have the Add Item drop-down. And there is our list of reservable items or equipment types taken directly from our equipment list that we created. And every item is on this list if we marked that it is possible to reserve it. If we mark can reserve yes, it's going to appear on the list. Here's our camcorder. We'll pick one of those. As soon as I pick it, it appears on the equipment list. But as quick as that was, a lot of things happened. Facil first checked the inventory, found this kind of item, checked to see the quantity available, compared that to the quantity we're requesting, which is 1. Of course, it's doing that based on the start and end time. It's checking all the other reservations to see how many are reserved. It's also checking to see if a certification is required to use that piece of equipment. If so, it checks the member to see if they have that certification. If it's a package item, it's checking all the individual pieces of the package to make sure they're all available. All of that happens in just a moment, as you saw. Of course, Facil is a multi-user system, so you can have any number of people making reservations at the same time. And as you see, it just takes a second to add each item. Let's go ahead and add some more items. If we have a camera, we're probably going to want batteries. And, actually, I accidentally added a second camera, but that's no problem. It's very easy to delete an item. Now we'll get a battery to go with that camera. And one more battery. Because these batteries are tracked individually, we pick them one at a time. If we want an item, say that's a supply item, something along the lines of these AC power strips, then Facil says, how many do you want? We'll take 3 of those. And each item is added. You notice the value of use is being calculated as we go. Another feature to help you is what we call a kit, where you can define any set of reservable equipment types and reserve them all at once. A field production kit is a good example. Now, I made this reservation by picking each item individually. I'm going to delete the items. And this time I'm going to say, just give me the kit. That would be the field kit featuring the M999 camera. And you see what Facil does automatically reserves my camera, power cords, batteries, light kit, microphones, mixer in this predefined field kit which you set up. So it's very quick and easy to make even a complex reservation of this kind. All of these items were checked for status, availability, member certification, and so on, even though they were added there in a group. They're all handled according to all the rules that are built into Facil. After we've entered the data for our reservation, we're going to want to give a hard copy to the person making the reservation. You may want to keep one for yourself. And we can print a complete reservation receipt just by clicking on the print button right here. And that receipt contains all of the information to tell us what's in that reservation. You'll notice that it has the reservation number, the name of the person making the reservation, the start time and date, and end time and date, what project the reservation is for, and then a complete list of all the equipment and facilities that are being reserved, including the quantities, value of use. At the bottom of the form, in addition to the totals of value, there is a block of text of your own definition, and you can put as much text on the form as you wish to remind the member of their responsibilities, what the rules are, a place for them to sign, whatever it is that you want to customize the reservation receipt form. Of course, at the very bottom there, it also shows us who made the reservation and when. So you have a comprehensive receipt. Let me show you a couple other features that we can access now from the reservation form. All these command buttons give us other capabilities. We're going to start with some more details about the reservation itself. If we look at the equipment list and the buttons together, when we first made the reservation, we set a start and end time. But Facil also has the flexibility to reserve each piece of equipment in the reservation for a different time. An example of how you would use this would be a studio production. You might want to reserve the green room for the 2 hours, starting 2 hours earlier than the studio. You might want to reserve the prop room. You might want to reserve cleanup time that would involve the studio but not other capabilities. So you can actually mix the times, start and end times, within the one reservation. And if we look at the form, you'll see how you can do that. You'll notice a button here that says Show Item Times. Clicking that, we see that every item on the list actually has its own start and end time. Of course, in a typical reservation, they're all filled in already using the overall start and end times. But if I decide, for example, that this light kit, which I'm seeing here at the bottom, that I actually need that for a time starting an hour earlier, I just edit that time. We'll make it 5 p.m. instead of 6 p.m. And let's say I want to bring it back an hour later. So we'll say 10 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. When I save that record, Facil rechecks, because we're changing the time we're requesting it for, rechecks the item availability. And I can see now that the item, yes, is available for that new time. There's no problem. If it were not available, I would get a notice. And now, when I go back to the normal display, eliminating the times, you'll notice here is a little clock icon. And that tells me, and the pop-up there shows me what it means, tells me that this particular item is reserved at a different time than the rest of the reservation. We've already talked about this concept of value of use. You'll notice that every item here, the value of use has been calculated based on the length of time it's being reserved for and the value that you've set in your equipment definition. But it's good to know that when you start accounting for value in this way, the people who are using the equipment and facilities take this very seriously. They really start to understand the meaning of using this equipment and how much it's worth to them. And along those lines, we allow you then to adjust the charges, because sometimes people may feel that they need to get a credit. Let's say you gave them a battery and that battery was dead. They bring the equipment back. They say, you know, that shouldn't really come out of my allocation. Fine, we can make an adjustment there. If we look at the form, there's a button that says Other Charges, and we have a little listing here in the same place that the equipment list was, and we'll just put here dead battery credit, $2, and of course we're making that minus $2 since it's a credit, and it records when it was made and by whom. We'll click the Other Charges button again. It goes back to normal. If you look down in the lower right here, as we have added equipment, made other changes, and so on, we're always seeing the total value of the reservation, the equipment charges and any other charges. So here we have $12, $2 credit, total of 1017. So there's other charges. We looked at off times. If we go back to the reservation receipt form, you'll see that all that information is also shown on the reservation receipt. Right in the middle, you can see that light kit has been reserved for a different time, and you can see that it shows the separate start and end time for the Lowell light kit right in the middle of the reservation list. At the bottom of the reservation, it shows the other allocation charges. There's a battery credit, there was a damaged piece of equipment, and so on. So these separate charges are shown, and those off times for the particular reserved item are shown separately. The last thing to show you, a special feature of the reservation system, is the ability to duplicate reservations. Very often when you make a reservation, you want to repeat it maybe every week or even every day for some period of time. So let's look at the form, and we'll look at how we duplicate a reservation. Let's start a new reservation very quickly. We'll pick a project. We get some notices about the project. We get notices about the person who is the producer of the project. We'll pick a date and time, say next Friday. Let's go with 3 in the afternoon. And we're going to reserve an edit suite. Here's that notice. We talked about what would happen if one item in a facility package were not available, and it's telling us that a unit in Edit 1 is not available. Which item it is, Sony VHS Edit Deck, and it has a status of repair. It does not stop us from using that item because we did leave it the overall edit suite as available, but it warns us. We accept that, and the edit suite is reserved. We can stop there, but typically we don't complete the editing of a program with one 3-hour edit session. We would probably want to come back. So now we'll take advantage of the duplicate function over on the right side of the form, where the buttons are. The top button is to duplicate reservations. Of course, whatever reservation we're looking at is the one that's going to be duplicated. And here we have the form that lets us duplicate a reservation. A reminder of what we're working with here, which reservation it is, what the length is, and so on of the original reservation. There are shortcut buttons here to pick dates, but basically all we have to do is build a list of dates now that we want to duplicate this reservation to. If we want to do it every week, we simply click Add a Week, add another week, and another one. And as I add each one, Facil has calculated the date, the 27th, 3rd of November, 10th of November, and checked to see that all the equipment in the reservation is available. And it's telling us with the green check mark that this is available. These reservations have not been made yet. There's a save button here at the bottom, and the reservations will not actually be recorded until we click save. That gives us a chance to edit. For example, if the person says, oh, you know what, Friday here is good, but this week I need to do it on Thursday. No problem. We'll just switch it to Thursday. It checks it again, still available. So now we have Friday, Thursday, Friday. So as much flexibility as you need, either shortcuts or editing them individually until we have the list of dates that we want to duplicate the reservation. They do not all have to start at the same time. Let's say on that Thursday, he says, you know what, and let's start that an hour earlier. Okay, still available, no problem, ready to go. I simply click Save. I can choose here with this checkbox if I want to print a new reservation receipt for each of those. You may choose to not have them printed individually since they're all going to really be basically the same. I'll just say Save Reservations. We're getting the warning about the equipment. And you'll notice as it does each one, it marks it here, reserved, and all 3 reservations have been made. The Save button is gray now, and we can just close the duplicating form. We're looking still at the original reservation. Let's take advantage of another feature now to see all the reservations we just duplicated. Also on the set of command buttons, we have a person reservation list and a project reservation list. That's going to show us all the reservations for this person or all the reservations for this project. We'll go with project, And here is a list of all the reservations for the project. And we're going to look at this reservation viewer form again a little later in some detail. But just so you can see quickly now, the last three listed right here are the duplicates of the first one we made, the 3 duplications we made. And you notice they're labeled duplicate of number 34, telling us what the original reservation is. So there's a quick and easy way to make multiple repeating reservations. We'll close the viewer form. On the reservation form in those command buttons, we have buttons for the checkout process, checkout and check-in. And one of the nice things about it is that we try and make that as automatic as possible using the tag numbers that you have on your equipment, so that as you hand each piece of equipment across the counter, you can record in the reservation form that it was given out and which one it was by recording the tag number. If we look at the reservation form, we have a column here for the tag numbers. The reservation may have been made 2 weeks ago, and now the person is standing on the other side of the counter and would like to have the camcorder and 3 batteries that they've reserved. So you could type in the tag number of each of those 4 items using the normal way of editing. Put the cursor there, type, save, cursor, type, save. But we've given an easier way to do that by simply pressing the checkout button. And what you get is a small dialog box that is asking you to enter a tag number. If we zoom in a little bit so we just see this area, and we'll watch how this happens. I can enter my tag numbers now. Perfect. I can enter my tag numbers now in any order as I look at each piece of equipment, and Facil will accept that and go on to the next item automatically, and it will fill in the tag number for you and put it in the correct place. One important aspect of this is that when Facil is sitting here saying enter the tag number and waiting for keystrokes to be typed, this is when you can take advantage of barcoding. If you have barcoded labels on your equipment with the tag numbers, you can use your barcode reader at this point and just pick up the item, swipe the barcode, that will enter the tag number into this box and put the item down and pick up the next one. And all you have to do is swipe each item. Now, I'm not actually using a barcode reader. I'm going to type the numbers in, but it works exactly the same way whether you're typing in the numbers or using a barcode reader. I'll pick up my first item, and it happens to be a battery. And the number on that battery is 34. So we have 34, enter, and you see what happened? It filled in 34 for the first item of that type. It located it automatically. Here, it says, okay, 34 is checked out. Enter another tag number. So all I do is enter the next one, 35. There it is. And the other one I pick up is 32. Or maybe, let's say I pick up the camcorder next. Camcorder has tag number 10, filled in. Now, let's say I put in an invalid number, or a number that doesn't exist. Then I'm going to get that message. Now, the tag number you entered doesn't exist in the equipment inventory. Okay, something wrong there. Either the tag is wrong or the item was never entered. That's okay. We can't make that mistake. And I'll enter another battery. If I enter the same number twice, which you could only do by accident really, it's going to tell me that that number, 34, has already been checked out. Let's try 32. Okay, there's my third battery. And now, here's another feature that you can take advantage of. If you pick up another item that you do want to check out that is not in the reservation, it will be added to the reservation for you automatically. Now, when you do that, it follows the same rules as adding any other item to a reservation using any other method. In other words, it checks to see if the item is not already reserved for someone else during this time. It checks certifications. It checks everything that needs to be checked. So let's say the person says, oh, you know what? I'm going to be shooting indoors. I need a light kit. You look on the shelf. You pick up a light kit. It happens to be tag number 4421. You press enter. And it asks you, do you want to add this light kit? That way, if you accidentally typed in a number thinking it was one thing and it was something else, it said, no, wait a minute, you're adding a new item. Yes, that's right, I want to add that new item. Done. Tag number entered 4421 is a light kit. L22 is not listed among the reserved items. I said yes, item added, and there's the item has been added for you. So this is a big help. It speeds up checkout and lets you add new items to the reservation automatically and takes advantage of barcoding. We looked at the details of making individual reservations, and another very powerful tool that we have to manage reservations is the appointment book. This takes the approach of a calendar display to show us what's reserved at what time and who's using it. I'm going to click on appointment book, and here is the form, and it's a large form that allows us to look at 6 different kinds of equipment at the same time. You'll notice basically that across the top are the types of equipment, and down the side are dates and times. So this grid now is going to show us how many are available, who has reservations. If we look at the top of the form in the left, upper left, the main tool that we use to select the time is the calendar right here. I'm going to go back to a date when we had a lot of activity, and I'll pick the time I want to start. And here we see the selected date and time starting, and then half-hour intervals. That interval can be adjusted, 10, 15, 30, or 60 minutes. Here's our half-hour interval, and again across the top, in this case we're looking at edit suites. So it's telling us who is using each edit suite and at what time. The legend here in color shows us that the green means that there are no reservations for that kind of equipment. Blue, there are some reservations, which would apply when we have multiples of the same item. It tells us some of them are reserved. Yellow is all reserved, and red, which we don't see too often, is overbooked. Now again, Facil will not allow you to reserve the same piece of equipment twice, a studio twice at the same time. It does not allow that kind of overbooking. But it certainly is possible to have an overbooking situation because you may make the reservation first and then the availability of the equipment changes. Either some cameras are broken or the studio is out of service or whatever. So if the reservation is made first and then the number of items available changes, then of course you can have an overbooking situation, and that will show on the appointment book calendar. There are also all kinds of reports, plus when you change the status of the item, you're warned about overbooking. So Facil does a thorough job of taking care of that. The number that you see, which says 1 throughout here, is how many of the item are available. Because we're looking at the 4 edit suites, that number is always going to be 1, and if there is a reservation, then of course that's all reserved, because there is only 1 to be reserved. Okay, let's look at how we can pick other pieces of equipment to look at. If we move to the right a little bit and look at the 5th column is empty, I can pick from my full list of equipment here. And if for some reason I wanted to see, say, these batteries at the same time I'm looking at the edit suites, I'll just pick that piece of equipment. That is now shown in this column. And here, because we have 10 of these batteries, you can see the difference. We have 10, then we get into some reserved, 8, 7, 4, 6, and you see the number going up and down, and this represents multiple overlapping reservations as different quantities of these batteries go in and out. So it's a continuous balance, if you will, showing us exactly what's available. Now let's look at some other things we can do with this. At the top, we have a control called the appointment book page, and what this does is it deals with predefined groups of equipment. You don't want to have to pick what items you're looking at in the appointment book every time you use it. So we predefine as many different pages as we want, and each page represents 6 pieces of equipment or 6 kinds of equipment that show in the 6 columns. So if I pick the light and power page, I'm going to see light kits, power boxes, extension cords, the 6 kinds of items that I've defined for the light and power page. And you can have as many of these as you want, and of course you can have the same item appearing on more than one page. You may want the studio to be included in perhaps rooms and maybe editing, any way you want. You can duplicate, mix and match to get the listings that you want. Let's go back to edit suites, which is where we were. Now, we see the name of the person who has the reservation. If I want to know the full details of any of these reservations, I can simply double-click on that spot in the grid. So let's find out what this reservation is for Tom Turner. Double click, and it loads the entire reservation form pre-selected to that reservation. And here's Tom Turner, that date and time, and we see, yes, he has the edit suite, but he also has these other items reserved as well. I'm going to move this a little bit so we can go back and forth. There's the appointment book. Let's check into this other reservation for Walker McRae. Double click, and here's Walker McRae's reservation for Edit Suite 4. So you see how easy it is to have all the detailed information you want about each of these reservations. Now you can also use the appointment book to make new reservations. Let's pick a date in the future. Right now we're looking at a date in the past. Let's jump up to around Christmas time and make a reservation. Let's just look at the reservations for that time, starting at 8 a.m. on the 24th of December, and there are no reservations yet. Okay, we decided now that we see that there's space available, we want to start a reservation, and by simply picking the piece of equipment and the time, we'll just start at that intersection. So we're going to reserve Edit 1 VHS starting at 11 a.m., and right up in the right-hand corner here is the new reservation button, and we get an abbreviated reservation form because we've already picked the time and we've already picked the equipment. All we need now is to fill in the project. We get the same notices that we would get if we were making the reservation for the reservation form. We see the same information about the project and the person, and if the 3-hour default length is what we want, we're already done. Okay, we'll even adjust that. We'll say, no, we want to go until 4. Okay, and now we save the reservation. We're getting the warning about equipment status. Here's our new reservation. The reservation form loads automatically. We can print our receipt now. We could add other equipment to the reservation that we started from the form. Or we go back to the appointment book, and there's our new reservation that we just made. So you see the powerful interaction between the appointment book and the reservation form. Let's look at one more thing on the appointment book in a more complicated situation where we have multiple reservations. If we look at the form here, we're looking at light and power equipment, light kits, batteries, extension cords, and so on. And because we have multiples of these items, we're seeing, for example, with this light kit, we start with 4 items. 1 goes out, we have 3, comes back in. If we go over to the next one, there are 3, then 2, then 1, then it drops to 0, back to 1. So this is the number available at any given time, showing us none reserved, some reserved, all reserved. So how do we know who has this equipment reserved? Because there are multiple reservations here. We can't show all the names. All we do is select the time that we're interested in and the equipment, say this cell here, double click, and we get a list of the multiple reservations that are involved at that time for that piece of equipment, telling us who has the reservation, what project it's for, the start and end time, and we can see that they're different, 9 a.m. to 3, 9:30 to 12:30, and so on, but they're overlapping, so they all cover that time. If I now want the detail on any one of these, I can quickly click the link button and see that full reservation form for that one particular one from the list of multiple. We'll back up a little bit here so you can see the whole form. And I'm going to move that over to the side a little bit. And you see, here's our multiple list. Again, the capability of Facil to show us more than one form at a time comes in very handy here. We have the appointment book. We have the list of reservations for the selected cell in the appointment book that we were working with. And we have the individual reservation form. And now I can go back and forth and say, I want to see this reservation. There's the details. I want to see this one. There's the details, and so on. When I'm done reviewing that, I can just close the reservation form, close the list, and I'm back to the appointment book. Again, of course, I can make a new reservation from here or jump to a reservation and edit it. So powerful management using a calendar-based format of all of your reservations. There's a second appointment book in Facil, what we call the 2-week appointment book, that lets you see one piece of equipment over a longer period of time. Where the first appointment book is based on a single day and showing multiple kinds of equipment, here we look at just one kind of equipment but over a 2-week period. So you would use this appointment book when you're interested in knowing when will something be available. For example, if we pick the same edit suite, it shows us starting today by default. For today on this row from 12 a.m. to 11 p.m., this is a 24-hour display. The next day, next day, next day. If we look a little bit over to the right, we can see that there are reservations from 3 to 5 p.m. for that edit suite on those dates. So here we get a 2-week overview for any one piece of equipment. So this is the tool you would use when the question is, when would the studio be available? When would Edit Suite 3 be available? You can see the whole thing quickly here, 2 weeks at a glance. All the same functionality of the other appointment book is available here. I can double click on the cell and see what reservation that is. I can pick a time and a date and start a new reservation from here. Everything we did on the other appointment book works the same way on this one. The only difference is that this is a longer time view for one piece of equipment. We've already seen that there's several different types of appointment books that you can use in Facil to help you control and make reservations. And there's one more variation on the appointment book that's proven to be very successful and helpful in a lot of organizations, and that's the public appointment book. This is a simple way that anyone can look and see when equipment is available. It's very similar to the 2-week appointment book that we just looked at, but it does not have the ability to change or enter any information. With this mechanism, you can put a computer out where everyone can get to it, not just your staff, but everyone who comes into your facility, and they can just walk up to it and find out for themselves when that studio might be available, when an edit suite is available. This saves a lot of facilitator time because invariably, without something like this, the first question that anyone is going to ask your facilitators, your people who are scheduling, the first question is going to be, when can I get whatever facility or equipment they want? This way they can find out for themselves, make their own decision without taking up the facilitator's time, that the best time for them to edit or use the studio is on a certain date. And then when they go to the facilitator to make their reservation, that part's already taken care of, and they can just tell them the exact date, and the facilitator knows the equipment will be available when he goes to reserve it. Let's look at the public appointment book very quickly. We'll start from the main menu. It's actually accessed from a sub-menu, the admin menu. So we'll click on admin. And right here is the button for the public appointment book. You'll notice this little message tells us that a password is required, not to enter, but to exit the public appointment book. In this way, you can put the public appointment book out on a computer that people can get to, and it's running, and they cannot get out of it. They can't go to other parts of Facil or do other things and be in areas where you don't want them to be. They can only be in the public appointment book. When you're ready to exit the public appointment book, to close it down or go on to something else, you have to enter this password. Right now the password is set to OK to exit, but you can put your own password in, of course. So that's the reminder, and here's the public appointment book. We call it the public reservation calendar on the form. If we take a wide shot of this so we can see the whole form, everything up here is just like it was in the 2-week appointment book. Selecting your date, selecting your equipment, the legend, the date, time, everything works the same way. To make it easier for someone to use without training, here at the bottom we have some additional buttons that were not on the 2-week appointment book. And if we just look at those quickly, we can see that the first one lets the person select what kind of equipment they want. Here is a way of moving through 2 weeks at a time, the next 2 weeks or previous 2 weeks, because that's how much the calendar shows. Pick a start date and update the display. And next to each of those is a little detailed instruction. So anyone can walk up to this, look at this, read these simple instructions, and just by clicking on a couple of buttons, and let's go to the full shot of the form, and we'll do it quickly. Select equipment, pick it from the list. It looks exactly like it does in the 2-week appointment book, but of course there's no way to enter a reservation, and also you cannot see the details of who holds the reservation. People don't need to know who has a reservation. They only need to know whether the equipment is available. That's all there is to the public appointment book, but it saves a lot of staff time by letting people find out for themselves when things are available. We'll click the exit button, and here's the password we talked about. That's the only way out. And we go back to the admin menu, and from there, back to the main menu. There's another kind of tool in Facil to let you look at large amounts of data at one time. As we looked at these different forms, the reservation form, for example, there's a lot of detail on the form, but you can only see one reservation at a time. So another way of looking at that data is with a tool we call a viewer, which is basically just a list of the reservations, but it has special controls to help you find the reservations that you're interested in. When we open the reservation viewer from the main menu right here, I've got one set already. It opens up by default showing all the active reservations for today's date. If we look at the list of reservations, we see the person, project, status, start time, end time, a note. If we want to go to the specific reservation and see the form, we have the link button. Now, how is it determining what reservations are shown in this list out of all the reservations in the system? At the top of the form are a number of controls, all these white boxes that we call criteria controls, that let us choose which ones we're going to see. You'll notice right now the criteria is set status active. Therefore, of course, it's only going to show us reservations whose status is active. The date range is set from 9:20 at midnight till 9:21 at midnight. So we're only seeing the reservations that overlap the date 9:20, and we can see that from the start and end dates. If we wanted to filter further, we could pick one project or one person. Let's pick a project here, always with the same tool. And by picking that project ID, we see only the reservations that are active on this date for this project. If I wanted to see all the reservations for this project, all the active reservations regardless of date, I would simply clear the date criteria by clicking the X. That opened up the end date, so now we're seeing from 9:20 forward. If I clear the start date, there were no others. So from 9:20 through December 24th or any other date for this project, because that's the criteria we've set, and for the status of active. So by combining these different criteria, we can filter the set of reservation data and see just what we're interested in. Another way we can do this, we can turn off all the criteria. Let's do that. Turn off the status. This is all the reservations now for that project, including the ones that were completed. And of course, those are at earlier dates. And now we'll turn off the project as well. Now we have every reservation in Facil is shown on this list. By the way, if we move a little bit to the right here, I'll move it over, we can see how many reservations are on the list at any time. So right now it says 38. If again, we'll say we'll filter by project. If we want to know just that project, there are 14. So that helps us right away in knowing what's going on. All right, let's clear the criteria again. We're seeing all the reservations. And over here, we can select one equipment type. So what I'm saying is, I only want to see the reservations for this kind of camcorder. And there they are. Now, it doesn't show what equipment is being reserved here because, of course, there could be many pieces of equipment and we're only showing one line of information. But we know by setting the criteria that all of these reservations include this piece of equipment. So now we can start doing things like saying, show me all the reservations this month for the studio, and so on. In addition to just viewing the list, once we've made our selections and set our different criteria, we also have command buttons right here that let us do a mailing list or an instant report. Okay, let's take a look at the instant report. It shows us a reservation list, and I elected to have full detail, so it's showing each reservation and all the pieces of equipment, but it's only showing me the reservations that met the criteria I set. And it tells us right here, equipment type, camcorder T500. So I'm seeing every reservation, and let me scroll this a little bit so we can see it. Every reservation that includes that piece of equipment. At the bottom, we have a total count of reservations and also the total cost. Let's clear that. And of course, these reports are printable. That was the report preview we were looking at. Let's look at another example of how you might want to use this. Let's say we want all the reservations for one project. Simple and common need. We'll pick the project. We'll turn off the equipment criteria because we want all the reservations for that project. And then we'll use the instant report button. This time I'll answer this question no. It asks me, this question refers to the list of equipment detail. And now I get a brief list that shows me all the reservations for the project, the date, who made them, how much they cost, or the value received, I should say, and all the other information that I need. Another way we can take advantage of the reservation viewer is by using it in conjunction with our mailing capability. Let's look at the viewer form. I've set it up to see only active reservations and only the reservations that involve the Edit 1 VHS edit suite. What I want to do here is get in touch with all the people that hold these reservations. Now, if I look at the names, I see that even though there are 8 reservations, it's actually only 3 different people. By clicking the mailing button over here on the right, I'm going to get an instant mailing list of everyone who holds these reservations. Click, there's my mailing list, and actually, okay, there are 4 different people. It tells me the count right here, how many of them have email, and I'm on the output page, and it tells me what I'm looking at, persons with reservations from the reservation viewer. So again, I've just created an instantaneous mailing list of the people holding the reservations I selected. Now I can do an email to them or mail merge or whatever I need to do and notify them about whatever is going on, whatever it is that is happening with that edit suite. So there we've used the viewer in combination with the mailing capability. We used it with the reporting capability. Of course, we have a link button on each reservation here in the viewer so that we can jump to that reservation record. If we back out a little bit and look at the whole screen, we'll get the 2 forms near each other or overlapped. And here's our viewer, and here's our reservation detail. And I can say, okay, let's look through these active reservations for Edit 1. And there's one, and the next, and so on. So I can get to any one of them instantaneously just by clicking the link button. Now, the last thing about the reservation viewer, and this is very important, is one of the things we want to do is track the completion of reservations. Making the reservation is the big step, but noting that the person showed up, that they weren't late, that the reservation was completed successfully, that's also an important piece of information you want. Now, we hope that you're fortunate enough that most of your reservations are completed normally, but we have a tool right here on the reservation viewer, the check mark, and by clicking that button, it will complete the reservation without your having to go to the reservation form, load it up, look at it, and so on. Let me close the reservation form. This works particularly well when you're looking at the default view of today's active reservations. You could just use this at the end of the day, for example, and you would be seeing a list of today's active reservations by default, and then you can just go through them and check the ones that are completed. Let's set the form up so we're looking at all the active reservations, and we'll filter the date a little bit so that we're only looking at a couple days back. And here's our active reservations, and now if I click each check mark, if you watch the status field here while I click the check mark, you see that it's just one click to record each completed reservation. Now, if the person, say, didn't show up or was late and you want to record that, that's not a normal completion, so we'll jump to the form instead and we'll use the status and mark that they canceled it late, they no-showed. Again, these status choices are yours. So it's very easy to keep track of the status of every reservation using these kinds of automated tools.